right. We are back for another edition of the Starting 502 podcast. A little ode to Will Reddington days there with the All Right. If you ever listen to the Will Reddington podcast in the early days of the Starting 502, he always started with that All Right. I don't know why. Every time though. Just
I do
instinctive.
remember hearing that.
Presley Meyer, Jake Hook on the other end. As always, Starting 502 brought to you by Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon, one of the fastest growing bourbon brands in the world. And of course, created by none other than Russ Smith, uh, who's had a heavy play in just Louisville culture as a whole. Can't wait to see him get back and involved, especially with Peyton Siva, back involved heavily with Louisville basketball now as a coach. Jake, how are things? How's engagement? How's the house life? What's going on?
Engagement is good. We move into the house a little over a month from now, a little more than a
Mm-hmm.
month. So we're excited. My fiance continues to sell things while we're still living. So we no longer have a bedroom suit. So all of our clothes are on the ground, and I no longer
Oh,
have a
sick.
nightstand. So I have a box that I use from now on. So it's good. We're excited. We're really excited. We're gonna buy a lot of new furniture. So once we get past this last month in the apartment, we'll start to move into a house, which will be so fun. Also, does Russ Smith have a movie out right now?
Oh, I don't know. Now I know Russ Smith had a movie made about his life, like a low budget film
Okay, yeah.
spearheaded by his father. I don't know anything about any actual movies going on. Now that's something I would watch.
I think we're talking about the same thing. Maybe Russ has just been promoting it on his Twitter more because I've seen it 3 or 4 times pop up in the last but that movie wasn't it like 20, it was like 10 years ago almost, the movie that you're
It's
talking
it's
about,
been a
right?
little bit. It's been a little while. I don't know if it was 10 years, but it's been a second for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they came out with a new edit of the movie or something. I don't know. I'd have to look into that.
It's called
Uh,
Underrated, the official Russ Smith movie.
yeah, yeah. That's we love Russ. I've never seen the movie, so maybe I should check that out.
Said it just
Um,
had a screening in New York City, so I don't know if it's
hmm,
available very widely.
there you go. Brought to you as always by Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. Make sure you check it
Mhm.
out, Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon.com, store.mr and Mrs. Bourbon.com. So yeah, exciting times to be a Louisville basketball fan. The last time we left you was just after the commitment of Ali Khalifa, uh, of formerly of BYU, who is now going to be redshirting at Louisville. And we kind of left you with, I kind of made a, not a promise, but, um, I had a thought that by the end of Thunder weekend, that Louisville would have at least two commitments. And although that did not come to fruition, within a week of that recording, Louisville's gotten three commitments. Started with Koren Johnson out of Washington, a guy who we talked about quite a bit. Chucky Hepburn out of Wisconsin, and then Abubacar Traore from Long Beach State. Um, Three guys that we're very excited about. I mean, I dive into any of these guys in any order that you want, but I think the main thing, for fans to know as of right now, uh, as of the evening of April 25th, 2024, Louisville has 8 scholarship players on the roster. As far as we know, 2 returning walk-ons in Hersey Miller and Aiden McCool. At point guard, right now you're looking at Koren Johnson of Washington and Chucky Hepburn from Wisconsin. Rain Smith is really the only true shooting guard, although I'd say Johnson or Hepburn could slide into that position as well. Additionally, you have Javon Hadley from Colorado and Terrence Edwards Jr., 2 guys that could also play the shooting guard spot, but I think fit best at that 3. You have Abubacar Traore, who we'll get into here in just a second. The aforementioned Ali Khalifa from BYU, who is redshirting, and then James Scott from College of Charleston. So, we'll get into what Louisville needs to look for next, but let's dive into what we have now. I guess we can start from the beginning. Koren Johnson from Washington. Um, ultimately, what's your takeaway from this commitment?
I think, sorry, I think out of the 3 guys we've got, I think Koren Johnson excites me the most. He
Okay.
is like electric quick, like crazy, like almost similar, maybe Maybe not as fast as Tylor, certainly more under control than Tylor, had a better than 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which Tylor never came close to. But just like crazy fast to the ball, can get by anybody, amazing in transition, good passer, and can shoot. So, I mean, to me, if you're going to comp him to anybody, he is Tylor Johnson if he was 3 inches taller and had 2 more years of college basketball experience. That's who he kind of reminds me of. And he's also a really good defender. That was one thing where like Tylor had quick hands, like he was able to pick pockets, but he was so often in the wrong spot because he was playing too aggressively, or he was just in the wrong spot off ball. And that's not really anything that I've noticed with Koren Johnson's game. So I think out of the three we got over the last 48 hours, he's the one I'm most excited about, with Chucky Hepburn a close second, and then also Abubacar Traore.
Yeah, man. Johnson is a guy that excites you, like you said, because of his speed and athleticism. He has a lot of intangibles that you can't teach. And I know that that's a cliche thing to say in some ways, but he has a lot of length for the guard position.
Crazy long
Uh,
arms.
Excellent defender. And I think that's just comes by nature, it seems like. Really quality defender on a kind of middle of the road Washington squad, to be honest. It looks like Louisville's looking heavily at another Washington player as well. We can get into that here in a second. But the only player so far on this roster that did not play in the NCAA tournament this past season. So we got into that a little bit. It seems like the staff is placing a heavy emphasis on landing guys that have had success, on the biggest stage in college basketball, which it is pretty exciting. But outside of that, I mean, there's not a lot of downside to picking up a guy like this. Not a great rebounder for his size, but I'm not sure that that's what was dictated in the system at Washington. But 2.7 assists. He was lighting it up by the end of the season. I believe he shot 50% from three over the last 8 games of the season. That's an impressive stat. And then I think I saw he shoots about 48, 49% from the right corner. So that seems to be like his spot, kind of like almost automatic from that position. This is a guy that if you didn't land Chucky Hepburn, I think you're comfortable with him potentially buying for like starter type of minutes. But then Louisville goes out and gets Chucky Hepburn as well. We can get back to Abubacar Traore, but since these guys both play the same position, Louisville went all out to land this guy. Like they identified who they thought their starting point guard should be. As soon as Chucky Hepburn hit the portal, he was immediately setting up a visit to Louisville. When he got to Louisville, they went all out to make sure that this guy felt welcomed, and it ultimately turned into a commitment right away. Initial thoughts on Chucky Hepburn? Is this the starter at point guard?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I mean, getting a guy, I think, what was it, On3, CBS 24/7, one of the major college basketball sites ranked the available point guards in the transfer portal, and I think he was ranked third. And I mean, it's rare that you're ever going to get a guy that has started more than 100 games in their career, is considered one of the best perimeter defenders in all of college basketball, and also shoots 37% from three. That's a combination that you just very rarely are able to get to your team. So to me, he's a great, solid player that you need, that can just steer the ship correctly, will always guard the best perimeter player on defense, and you'll be trusted with the ball, or you'll feel trusted whenever he has the ball. So to me, it's a great pickup. The shooting ability fits PK's system, and having him, I think, to me, Chucky and Corin should both start 1-2, and then go small ball Javon Hadley and Terrence Edwards 3-4. To me, that makes the most sense. I mean, you've got shooters everywhere. You've got two of the best perimeter defenders in all college basketball. I could see him coming off the bench. Obviously, Koren Johnson's very comfortable coming off the bench, being sixth man of the year in the Pac-12 last season, but they're both such good defenders. They would be probably the best defensive backcourt in the ACC, and probably a top 5 defensive backcourt in all of college basketball.
Yeah, I mean that's what jumps off the page to you, right? You have guys that, number one, they're both facilitators. Number two, they are above average to, probably elite level defenders at their position. And number three, they both shoot the ball very well for guys who are the primary ball handlers. So, when you put Chucky Hepburn in a kind of pick and pop situation, I mean, that can be lethal. You get him going downhill and distributing. You try to go under a screen and he can shoot. They defend 94 feet. There's a lot to be excited about for both of these guys. And that's why I wanted to kind of talk about them in tandem because, it seems like, obviously they had to have discussed the situation, right? And it seems like they were both very comfortable with what the staff pitched to them. I think it's a good point, Jake, that maybe they see these guys as the starting 1 and 2. And then, you have Rain Smith, you bring in one more guard, and then that's a really quality core of 4 guards. And then you also have, you still have quality ball handlers, especially like a Terrence Edwards. That's not a guy that you necessarily want running the point, but that's a guy that you're comfortable with the ball in his hands. He's still a quality distributor. And then the next guy that we're going to get into as well is one of the best passers at his position in the entire country, and that's Abubacar Traore. Again, Abubacar, I think we're going to end up calling him Abu, or we'll have some sort of nickname. I think we'd have to ask him what he likes. But a guy from the Ivory Coast who comes over, plays 3 seasons, I believe, at Long Beach State. To me, this is the guy. We touched on it a little bit last week, but the more I dive into it, this might be the guy that excites me the most out of anybody that Louisville's landed because of his positional versatility. Now, obviously, everybody's going to get into the one weakness of Traore's game is he is not a good shooter. And I mean, part of it is he doesn't even shoot, but when he does, he typically isn't making shots. But everything else, he is outstanding at. So he averaged 12 points, 8.4 boards. He averages 8.4 rebounds across his career, 4.5 assists, 1.5 steals, and 1.4 blocks per game. 1.4 blocks per game at 6'5".
That's insane.
That's tremendous. So I was doing a little bit of nerding out. Often we'll go on Bart Torvik's website. If you haven't checked out Bart Torvik, I think is it barttorvik.com? I think it's what it is.
That's right.
He has a tremendous site that is, for the most part, free to use. And you can play around with stats and see where guys rank in certain, super, macro type of statistics. If you separate every player in Division I college basketball from all 300 and what is it at this point, 324 teams, something like that, 323. If you separate out all of the players who have a block rate over 5%, a defensive rebounding rate over 10%, assist rate over 20%, and a steal rate over 2.5%, he's the only player in the country that does all those things. So again, block rate over 5%, defensive rebound rate over 10%, assist rate over 20%, and a steal rate over 2.5%. If you drop that number down to 17%, he's still the only player. If you drop the assist rate down to 17%, he's the only player in the country with those other statistics that's over a 17% assist rate. And he has a 26.6% assist rate, which is good for 133rd in the country. But again, this is a guy that is a specialist in rebounding, a specialist in blocking shots. And yet he's one of the top players in the entire country in assist rate as well. So kind of in short, he dishes out assists at the rate of a guard. He would have had more assists than any player on Louisville's team this season. He gets to the free throw line.
Might have more assists than our whole entire team put together.
He gets to the free throw line at the rate of like a Zach Edey type of player. Not quite that good, but we're talking top 150, top 175 good. And then he blocks shots better than almost anybody in the country. 56th in the nation in block percentage at 6'5". Just a tremendous addition. Super versatile player, can probably will play the 3 and the 4. But I mean, who I know you compared him to Pascal Siakam. Any other names that stand out to you? Maybe like a past Louisville player to compare him to.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been compared to Dwayne Sutton, which I see it a little bit. I mean, a good like undersized four. That's what he played at Long Beach State was the four. Doesn't have any 3-point shot like Dwayne did, especially later on in Dwayne's career. He was a corner specialist. He was every time he not every time he shot, but when he started his career and when he shot, you're like, oh no, please don't. But then by the end of it, you're like, oh hell yes, shoot that.
Right.
Um, but like you said, versatility is the name of his game. Like amazing active hands on defense. Like guys will go and post him up, and typically when you've got a big man and they're playing post defense, it's just arms up, try and not let him get as close to the rim, and then affect the shot once comes up. No, when a guy does a post move on a Abubacar Traore, his hands are in there. He's trying to rip it, which you don't really often see steals from the post position. So defense is great. He's pretty physical too for how small he is, and that as you can see, that's very clear. 8.4 rebounds a game. The only issues I see in his game is the obviously the shooting, and then he's kind of raw. You can tell at times on offense and on defense, he doesn't. It's hard to like just clearly say, but like he doesn't have a 10-year like feel of the game. Like you can tell like
Right.
he hasn't been playing for 15 years or 20 years. He hasn't been playing his whole life. So at times he's out of position on offense or he's not making that right play. He's over penetrating where defense is already in the paint, or on defense, he's just in the wrong spot. He loses his man a lot when he's like trying to play help defense. He'll just completely forget where his man is. So besides that though, I mean, if you could get him to be a 30% 3-point shooter, which we've only got him for 1 year. But if he could just, because defenses, I watched a couple of Long Beach State games, they're rondo checking him. Like they're at the free throw line and he's at the top of the key right on the 3-point
Right.
line and they're nowhere near him. And he's not even contemplating a shot. I think he had less than 15 attempts last year. So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
he's not shooting unless it's like 5 seconds left on the shot clock and he's just got to.
Yeah. I think he was like 2 for 23
Yeah.
this past season from
Sounds about right.
three. So not really his specialty. I think you found the stat that 84% of his shots came at the rim. So that's what he does. He's an excellent finisher in traffic. So, like you suggested, though, he looks kind of like to compare him to a former Louisville player. You know, a lot of these foreign guys come in a little bit raw, right? They don't play at the same level of competition or have the same level of training that you do in the States, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. You know, think like a Mania Core for Gorgie Zhang type of player, Mott Stockman, if you will. You know, a little bit robotronic still, a little bit, trying to get a feel for confidence and smoothness to their game. But I mean, man, this is a guy that's and he's just really impressive.
Yeah, and
Um,
hustle too. That's another thing we didn't
yeah,
bring up. Huge hustler. Like you're never gonna. A lot of times, the last couple of years, we've watched and we've been like, "Damn, like, do these guys even care?" Like at times, you did start to
right.
wonder, like, or we'd get down 15, 20, and you just kind of see him give up. When I'm watching him, there's no question to his motor is at 100% at all times. Other thing I love about him, he loves to get a rebound and immediately push transition. He doesn't get a
Mhm.
rebound and kick to his point guard. It's rebound, dribble, two dribbles, and he's past half court, three dribbles, and he's in the lane hitting a layup, or he's kicking out for one of the 4.5 assists he averaged per game. So really, really elite in transition. Koren Johnson is as well. So I think they could play super well together, just pushing the pace.
Yeah, man, I just the more I look at his statistics, the more I watch the highlights, the more I hear people who are experts talk about him. Get you pretty excited. I mean, 12 double doubles this season. He had a triple double in the Big West Conference tournament. So for people that don't know or didn't follow this story this year, Long Beach State was for the talent that they had on their roster. They were pretty pedestrian, and so entering the Big West tournament, their coach got fired. And so they came to an agreement. I don't know what the exact situation was, but basically they said, you can finish out this season, but after the season, we're asking you to. Then obviously they have to play, in order to get to the finals, they have to play quite a few games in their conference tournament. they go on this run, win their conference tournament, get into the big dance, and have a pretty impressive showing as a 15 seed. So that's kind of what Abubacar Traore was a part of this season. Went back and listened to some of his press conferences, and it was pretty impressive. He's got a good head on his shoulders. They really felt a responsibility to kind of put their coach on their back a little bit and step up. I mean, that's pretty much unheard of, something like that happening, right? Your coach gets fired, he stays with the team, and then all of a sudden you guys just start winning.
They still fired him.
They still fired him.
I guess it wasn't good enough.
So here's something from SB Nation, Mid-Major Madness, Marcelo Baller. Shout out to Marcelo Baller. I linked this on our website as well. This is a fantastic article on Abou Traore. I want to give you a few quotes from this article. I won't give you the whole thing because I think you guys should go check it out. Watching Traore's defensive film, you realize the magnitude of the prospect and why he could get a chance to play at the highest level in the near future, talking about the NBA. The intersection of elite athleticism, substantial wingspan, quick feet, and defensive instincts is simply too appealing to be ignored. He displays his tremendous versatility at every chance, on point of attack, switching on screens, facing bigger opponents down low, and contesting shots at the rim. In short, Traore is a coach's dream as a help defender, but is still a bit all over the place, since most of his defensive possessions are about covering ground in a hurry and closing out spot-up attempts. He is tremendously active in gaps and provides a sort of invaluable safety net for his teammates. He's a big reason the Beach ranked 50th in steals and 63rd in blocks for the year. I mean, that's high praise right there. And that's what the majority of the article sounds like. That's 3 paragraphs from a 3,000 word article. So yeah, make sure you check that out. SB Nation, Abubacar Traore. Again, another guy that just, it seems like we're finding these dudes that are just ultra productive all over the place, right? Like, I mean, Javon Hadley, a guy that we've simply not spent enough time talking about this dude. Javon Hadley, another tremendous defender, another guy that won't back down from a challenge. They're developing a culture. I mean, even Rain Smith, the guy that's clearly going to come off the bench, one of the better shooters in college basketball and just an absolute dog. Like, we're talking about, I know we talked about this a little bit, but in their conference tournament championship, they went into overtime, and as they're trying to push the lead open, he had an opportunity to go on a fast break, pass it to a teammate, drive to the basket, pull it back out, and extend the possession and kind of run the clock down a little bit. Dude just runs down the floor, cold-blooded, pulls up for a wide open 3-point shot and nails it. Every one of these dudes is ballsy. Every one of them is a willing defender. They all seem like they play with an attitude. I mean, this team is developing into, a roster that, if their personalities mesh, this could be something really special. I truly believe that, especially if they're able to land a couple more of these guys that they're after. Any final thoughts on the new guys before we dive into what could be next?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we very quickly understood that the type of player that Coach Kelsey wanted was shooters. If, like I wrote in the article, if you attempt more than 3.5 threes per game and you shoot better than like 35% from 3, you're getting a call from Pat Kelsey. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what it was. But as this roster has developed, it's also impressed me that we've got a lot of great defenders that we've added. Chucky Hepburn, Koren Johnson, Javon Hadley, Abubacar Traore. These are all like some of the best defenders in college basketball, which I think has really impressed me, because I was a little fearful going into it, because it's a prolific offense that he had at Charleston, but the defense one year was pretty solid. But besides that, the defense wasn't great. But it's also based on talent and who you have on your team, and the players that he's able to bring in right now, has been able to bring in, 60-70% of them are elite level defenders. So I'm really impressed with that. Final thing I want to say on Traore, in that first round matchup against Arizona, he put up 14 points, 15 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks. And that was a lot of times he was getting switched on to Oumar Ballo, who Louisville was in on for 2 days before he committed to Indiana.
Right.
But I know that a lot of people, when you get to these smaller schools, they're not playing at Washington, they're not playing at Colorado, and they're not playing consistent competition every single day. They're worried like, oh, can he put up these numbers against high level competition? Well, he did it at the biggest stage in the tournament, and he did it against one of the 5-10 best teams in college basketball. So I don't think we have to be concerned with, is this production going to transfer over?
Yeah, man, I agree with you there. I mean, that's when Louisville offers a player. The first thing I do, obviously, maybe try to find some tape on them, maybe look up what their statistics are, maybe like their per 40s. Next thing that I'm going to do is check out every Power 5 team that they've played in their career, and do they rise to the occasion, or do they kind of fall back to the mean, right? Whenever they play stiffer competition. And every one of these guys, to a man, has kind of stepped their game up on the biggest stage at the highest level. I'm can't probably not going to run out of good things to say about these guys. And once we get them onto campus, once we see how this team's starting to mesh, I think it could be even more exciting. But Louisville does have 6 more roster spots to fill. So after the break, we're going to get into that, plus a name that everybody wants to hear about. All that and more on the other side, starting 502.
Mr. and Mrs. is for everyone, from a more traditional 90 proof to a cash string that's smoother. In 2013, Russ going to the hole, and boy, could we use that right now. Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon covers tastes, all different taste of preferences, 6 different bourbons that they're offering. Be among the first to try Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon, the official bourbon of the state of Louisville, and the Starting 502 podcast, on shelves anywhere you find your liquor, and now online at MrandMrsBourbon.com.
All right, welcome back. Starting 502 podcast, Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. Go check it out today at store.MrandMrsBourbon.com to have it delivered right to your door. Jake, we have 6 more roster spots to fill, and I think you would probably be in agreement with me that at least 2 to 3 of these guys that join the roster need to be big men. And by big men, I mean either a traditional center, a pick and pop type of big, a more modernized big, or a guy that can play maybe the 4 or the 5, right? I think they have a lot of options and a lot of positional versatility with this roster. But I think one thing that they don't have quite yet is a big that's going to fit in Pat Kelsey's offense. But the one name that everybody wants to talk about, JQ, Jaden Quaintance. So today, Louisville got 2 commits in football, 2 commits in basketball, and then some very promising news about Jaden Quaintance, who we spent a good portion of our last podcast talking about as like kind of an outside long shot. All of a sudden, this guy is visited. People are feeling really confident, and then he receives he received 2 crystal balls from 247 Sports to go to Louisville, and then he received a prediction from Truly Donovan, who has not had the best track record predicting Louisville sports or Louisville commits. However, he was probably getting information that was just completely incorrect.
I don't think anyone was getting good information from our coaching staff or anyone inside the last 2 years.
I take that with a grain of salt. It seems like he has somebody who he trusts now, and has been, a little bit more accurate and confident on the Louisville front. Then all of a sudden, it comes out that, initially JQ was going to visit UK. That visit got canceled, and then that, fell by the wayside. He's not considering Arkansas anymore. He was initially committed to UK, for those who don't know. 5-star big man, top 10 consensus big man, or consensus top 10 player in the country, probably the number 1 or number 2 big man in this class. will play in college for 2 years. And it sounds like from everything that we've heard, wherever he goes, everybody's going to try to have a baked in contract that pays him for 2 years and not 1 year. Doesn't make the most sense, right? So JQ not considering Kentucky anymore, not considering Arkansas anymore, and had a visit to Memphis. Everything that we're hearing, he's down to Louisville and Memphis, and then all of a sudden postpones his trip to Memphis. And then, you're hearing that it might have even been canceled. And I'm not sure if that's what sparked the crystal ball predictions from some of these quote unquote experts, or if it was something a little bit more, extensive than that. But then the Quaintance camp comes out about an hour or 2 hours later and says, well, no, we're going to visit Arizona State this weekend. And then next weekend, we're going to go back to Memphis. So still, Louisville seems like they're kind of in the catbird seat. It seems like they're in a good position. However, they're still going to have to fend off, it looks like, Arizona State, and they're going to have to fend off Memphis. Quaintance, for those, again, who didn't listen last time, or you're not really in the know with what the recruiting of this kid is looking like, still only 16 years old. So he's basically skipped ahead almost 2 full classes. Could potentially be a part of the 25 or 26 class, skipped ahead a couple of classes, now is so far ahead that he's going to have to stay in college for 2 years. But with that in mind, he can't really make any decisions or do anything without his parents right now. So with his parents kind of largely in control, you listen to some of the interviews with this kid, and he's like, to be honest with you, I like Louisville, I like Kentucky, I like Arkansas, whatever it is. But he's like, I don't really know what we're doing next. He's like, I like all these places, but, we'll have to decide as a team, me and my dad, or, him and his mom, or whoever it happens to be. So, a lot of speculation out there. People have thrown out numbers like he was asking for $1.5 million, $2 million. I'm not sure if that's the case, but he's definitely going to be an expensive commodity. But, in my estimation, just because of the message that it could send to college basketball, may be worth it. What do you think, Jake?
Yep, I agree with you. I mean, I think and obviously it's not guaranteed you get him from 2 years, or for 2 years, but even if you sign him to we'll say $1.5 million NIL contract, that's going to be over 2 years. And as we've seen with these football players, just because you get it, if you don't play the 2 years, if you leave before it starts, that's almost like a cash advance. Like, you have to pay that money back. So I really wouldn't be worried about, we spent 1.5 million, we might only get him for a year and then he transfers out or goes to the G League or whatever. I think, like you said, it's worth it. From a basketball standpoint, dude's just a freak. If you get him here for 2 years, by that sophomore season, he's going to be one of the best big men in college basketball. But the message that it sends to the outside community, we're already signing 7, 8 guys now, showing that we're on track to be a tournament team next year. But you sign a guy like Jaden Quaintance, a top 10 player that was with UK, everyone assumed he was going to Arkansas, and then you steal him. That shows that we're back. Like, we're a big dog. We are a team that has to be reckoned with every transfer, with every recruit that comes in. We're going to be a threat to land, which is not something that we've been for quite some time now. So from a basketball standpoint, absolutely. But the off-court message it sends, even more. I think he's worth the price tag. Granted, I don't know what the price tag is, but if we can afford it, I think it makes sense. I think you go for it.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is one of those things, I think you're a top 25 team entering next year if you land a guy like this and hold on to him. I'm also of the opinion that, he has all of the tools, all the intangibles to be a starter right away. And that's what his dad is saying, and kind of what he's hinted at as well. He expects to be a starter wherever he goes. And it seems like Louisville's kind of put a lot of their eggs into this guy's basket, basically meaning that, he is, they see him as a potential kind of like a piece to build around almost. So I think that his game fits what PK does really well. It is interesting. He's played at the, a high level for his age, for a long time. And so with the way that modern high school and AAU basketball is, there's not a lot of posting up with the bigs. There's not like Samardo Samuels running down there and banging around in the post. There's a lot of, him having the float out to the perimeter. There's a lot of, it's a completely different. And so you really haven't seen much in the way of, what does he look like as a traditional back to the basket big? Because regardless of if you're a pick and pop big, or if you're a guy that can switch off on the smaller players, or you're a guy that can play out on the perimeter, whatever it is, you're going to be asked to be a post up big at some point. You have to be. And so that's one thing that we haven't seen. But based on his footwork, based on his athleticism, based on his size and length and experience, I can't imagine that he doesn't have some sort of pretty solid looking post game. But that's something I'd be pretty interested in seeing, because that's something he's going to have to showcase at the college level, especially if he wants to get to the NBA level. By the way, is my microphone on, or is my computer picking this stuff up? Is that doing anything?
I hear
okay.
you.
All right. Cool. All right. Beautiful. Yeah. So, excited about the potential there. Until he signed on that dotted line, this is one that I'm, going to be cautiously optimistic about. But I think this is a guy, like you kind of indicated, Jake, he fits PK's system so well. He wants to utilize his bigs, in pick and roll. He wants to utilize his bigs as like a pick and pop type of player. He wants to be able to switch them off on other players. He wants to be able to, utilize them in a variety of ways that really spaces the floor and spreads things out really well. And I think that that's what Quaintance can do. And that's kind of was my long way of kind of explaining that, because of the way that the game has been modernized in high school and at the pro level, college has had to adjust, even though the rules are a little bit different in college than they are almost anywhere else. The way that kids play now coming into college, it's not as you don't as often get traditional big men. And I think Quaintance is very far from that, but I do think he can play a lot of the five, and that's what Louisville needs.
Yeah, he's got all the intangibles that you would want from a big man: soft hands, ability to finish around the rim protector, already has range to about 15 feet, shoots threes, I think below 30%, but is already comfortable shooting those. He's not an Abubacar Traore where if he catches it on the perimeter, he's not even contemplating a shot. Like, he still is a threat there. He's not a reliable 3-point shooter, but even if you get your big man to come out there and he knows like he has the potential to shoot this three, that spreads out the defense more. So I'm excited for him. We've got I think it's 3 crystal balls on 3 to land him, but this transfer portal, I take the crystal balls with a grain of salt. Like, Freddie DeLeon was a guy we heard about a few weeks ago. I think he coached by Thomas Carr. Was that the connection to the staff there?
Yes.
And
yes.
Immediately had a crystal ball to us. And then a week and a half later, the crystal ball goes to NC State. And then the crystal ball is on NC State, and he comes out and commits to Penn State. And so it's just like it's in this era of the transfer portal, it is really, really difficult to get a gauge on where these guys are going, because any school can swoop in and be like, oh, NC State's only offering you $400,000. We'll give you $600,000, and immediately, boom, and you're going to take that. An extra $200,000 to earn, you'd be silly not to. So I feel semi-comfortable with where we're at right now. It does concern me a little bit that he's now visiting even another school in Arizona State. I felt more comfortable when it was us in Memphis, but him being like, oh, I'm also going to look at this school, kind of makes me feel like, is he just playing the NIL game? Is he just saying like, oh, and now I'm going to go to Arizona State, they're going to offer me 1.4. Can you give me 1.6? So interested to see that. His dad keeps disputing it on Twitter that it's not about NIL, but to me, it seems that way. And I can't blame him. I mean, if you've got a chance to make generational wealth at the age of 16, he could literally, if he gets, we'll say 1.5 million, I mean, that's enough money to support your family for the next 20 years at the age of 16. So I can't really fault the kid for wanting to make as much money as possible. It makes sense.
Yeah, it's I totally get it, and like we've seen a lot of coaches come out and say, you can't blame the players at all for any of this. I mean, they should be, trying to ask around, shop around, see what their value is. Now, if I am at my current position and I get a job offer for a place that I think I'm going to hate, but it's a 10 to 15% raise, am I going to take that job? Probably not. So there is give and take with that. And I understand all sides of things. Like, I don't think it's for 98% of players, it's not going to the highest bidder. And as we've seen with Louisville football team, it can be a fickle thing, and things can go south in a hurry if you have one or two bad actors get involved. Another reason why I like the players that Louisville's landed, because it doesn't feel like those types of personalities. So when I do a Google search, it says that Great Osabor is an athlete who plays basketball. When you type it into your Google search bar, they do this like AI thing now, and that's what it says: Great Osabor, athlete who plays basketball. Thank you, Google. I appreciate that. But a guy that, if you don't land JQ, or even if you do, a guy that I would take over almost anybody in the country is Utah State's Great Osabor, a guy who was the Big Sky Sixth Man of the Year a year ago, and this season was the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year when he moved over from Montana State to Utah State with, remind me of their coach's name. What's the coach's name at Utah State? Come on. Danny Sprinkle.
I was actually going to say Danny Sprinkle, but it felt wrong. Good call.
Danny Sprinkle just rolls off the tongue. That never feels wrong, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to these stats: 17.7 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, 2.8 assists per game, 1.3 steals per game, 1.4 blocks per game. 6'8", 245 pounds. One of the best athletes in the country. I mean, to me personally, if I'm going to give a bag to a player like Jaden Quaintance, I'd much rather give the bag to Great Osabor. Just my opinion. I'm not sure if he'd play the same position. I'm not sure if that's a guy that you want in the middle. And you do have Abou Traore now at the 4. And I'm assuming that's where he'd play most of the time. But I mean, you cannot pass up an opportunity like landing a guy like Great Osabor. Fantastic name, even better player. He went to high school in England. He's from Bradford, United Kingdom. So, I mean, thoughts on Great Osabor? I mean, I could, sit here and watch this dude's highlight tape for half an hour and never lose interest. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, physical beast is what I immediately just jumps off the page, but also skilled. Like those, what is it, 2.4 assists per game? Like actually, or 2.8. Like really impressive ability to play, make, and pass from the high post. I love his game. I'm with you. If you're telling me we can spend $1 million on Jaden Quaintance or we can spend $1 million on Great Osabor, I'm taking Great Osabor every time. I mean, he's proven that he will put up, if he comes to Louisville, he'll put up 15, 8, and 3 with an extra block and an extra steal every game as well. So to me, I don't have any doubt in his skill. I have doubt in his interest in Louisville at this point, because before he announced his list of 4 schools that he was going to visit, I hadn't really heard that we were even interested in him, or that I knew we were interested, that there was a mutual interest between us.
Right.
Everything I'd heard was UK, and they signed Amari Williams, who was his teammate in England.
Mm-hmm.
So it made logical sense that, oh, well, my former high school teammate is there, I'll go play with him. And that makes a ton of sense because they could play the 4-5 together. So to me, I still feel like Kentucky is the team to beat. But if we get him out of Lexington, he's visiting Lexington April 29th through May 1st. And then right after that, he's coming to Louisville the 1st through the 3rd. If we get him on that visit, my confidence will shoot up tremendously. But right now, I'm kind of sitting back, kind of like that Umar Ballo situation where he went to Bloomington first, and then we were right after that. Visit gets canceled. Day later, he's committed to IU. I still kind of see that is the way this could go for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine Pat Kelsey or whoever his connection is there. I know that we do have some connects with some guys in Australia, guys in Africa. Um, I would imagine any of these overseas players, they're all involved in this. What is it? The NBA? Is it the EYBL or the NBL? Something like that. A lot
Yeah,
of these players
national. Yeah.
are yeah, they play on a lot of the same international teams. Ali Khalifa and Rain Smith actually played on the same international team. Little connection that nobody knew about until both of them committed to the Louisville Cardinals. But you'd have to imagine whoever called Great Osobor up, they said, "Great, come to Louisville May 1st through 3rd. Bring your suit. We're going to the track." And that's an interesting time to get a recruit in. I don't remember this happening a lot in the past. Now, the recruiting game has gotten out of control as far as publicity and the way that we show off players and the way that we monitor what players are doing on social media and all this stuff. It's changed a lot in the past, but I don't remember a lot of players visiting and actually going to the Derby. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I would say there's a high likelihood that he's involved somehow. Take him to Oaks, get him around the track, get him feeling the environment in the city. I mean, dude, this is a guy that it would be the number one get in this class,
Yeah,
in my opinion. I mean, there are a lot of good players on this roster already, but this would complete your roster, and then you're just kind of filling in the gaps from there. And I mean, he has potential to be an all ACC type of player, 100%. So, yeah,
let him jockey a horse at the
yeah, let
Kentucky
him get on a
Derby.
horse. That wouldn't be weird at all.
Good Lord, that'd be the slowest horse in Derby history. I will say one thing I was thinking of, we've been talking about Quaintance. Are you concerned at all with the fact that this Quaintance recruiting is going a little longer than maybe we expected? And you're talking to him, and as you're developing this roster, you've only got a certain allotment of money. And if you're telling him we'll give you 1.5 million, is the staff going to hold back and be like, well, we still got a really good chance with Quaintance, so we're not going to offer Humrichous the full amount that he wants or whatever? Like, I guess
Right.
part of me is just a little fearful that a lot of our eggs are in this Quaintance basket, and if he doesn't end up choosing us, we're like, oh shit, now Osobor's gone, now Humrichous is gone, now so and so is gone, and then you're kind of left with those third, fourth, fifth pickings as opposed to being like, yes, great Osobor,
Right.
1.5 million,
Right.
come on down.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about that for two reasons. Number one, I think that they're in on quite a few players, and they're just having honest conversations with all these guys. I think that's just the most efficient and respectable way to do it, and the best way to keep guys involved. I think that there's a lot of conversations that go on behind the scenes, and they probably just have to be straightforward with them and be like, look, we're recruiting other guys at your position, but like, let's talk about your positional fit. Let's see, if our personalities mesh. I think there's a lot that goes into that. So I think they have a lot of names on their list. And, we'll get into the Humrichous thing here in a second, because there are, but he's a perfect example, right? Ben Humrichous, for people who don't know, an Evansville forward who visited Louisville kind of out of the blue. Nobody knew that he was even going to show up. And then he was just was it Koren Johnson?
Yeah, he just showed up in some pictures
on
with
his
band
visit.
with
Yeah.
Koren Johnson.
Yeah. So everybody's looking at these pictures from Koren Johnson. Like, who's that tall ass dude? And then we started doing some research. We're like, well, that's the kid from Evansville. And all of a sudden you start hearing, okay, well, he's down to Louisville in Illinois all of a sudden. Point being that they're probably talking to a lot of players that we're not even familiar with. And, they probably do. Most coaches do a pretty good job of not letting the cat out the bag unless, there's true, genuine interest, unless they're going to visit, unless X, Y, and Z happens. So that's number one. Number two, the NIL pool is not necessarily a limited amount of money, right? Like, that's going to be donations and, something that you can draw from. kind of in perpetuity, if you will. As long as you're recruiting at the rate that you're recruiting at now, as long as this turns into wins on the court, you'll keep seeing that money come through. At the end of the day, this is paying dividends for, people who are bringing in the big sponsorship bucks. They're going to get a huge drawback from that. I mean, you look at like a Rick Keeber, a guy who basically just donated $1 million just to NIL bookmarked for Louisville basketball. That's going to pay huge dividends for all of his businesses that he runs around the city. This is going to come back in major positive ways for those type of people. So with that in mind, as long as you implement a successful product, the money will continue to come in. So it's not like they have a set number where they're like, hey, this is our budget. That you could start out that way, but I think the reality is that it's a constantly moving number, and the metrics change day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. So those are the two reasons I'm not super concerned with that. If I'm the staff, if it's me personally, again, I'm taking a huge swing at Osabor. And if JQ decides not to come to Louisville because they're that heavily considering Osabor, I'm cool with that. That's a guy that's a national championship type of big right there. Mm-hmm. So again, like you said though, Jake, it sounds like Kentucky is in the driver's seat for that, but we've heard Kentucky's been in the driver's seat for a few guys this offseason, and then they ended up elsewhere, including Ali Khalifa, another center that is currently on Louisville's roster. So how about
on a horse in the Derby, and he will never leave the city?
Yeah, well, and that's what. Okay, that was the other thing I said. Make it a horse themed NIL deal. The next foal that's born to a certain barn, we name him the Great Osabor. I think that's a perfect horse name. I could totally see him coming down the stretch with 20 other horses on the first Saturday in May. I think that would be pretty exciting, Jake.
I'd bet on it.
The guy that we kind of mentioned just a second ago, Ben Humrichous of Evansville. Tell me about this guy's game.
Okay, so Ben Humrichous, one of the only dudes I've ever heard of starting at the NAI level and then ending up in major Power 5 basketball. I mean, I've had multiple teammates, buddies that have played at the NAI level, and I've watched those games. For the most part, it is not high quality basketball whatsoever.
No.
You are not looking at that court being like, man, that guy's got a career in basketball. You're like, man, why did this guy go to Podunk, Kentucky in the middle of nowhere to go play basketball for 4 years for a team that's going to win 8 games? That's what you see more. But Ben Humrichous spent 3 years at Huntington University, a tiny little school in Indiana, and didn't, his junior year at the NAI level, put up 12.8 points, 5.2 rebounds. I mean, those are okay numbers, but if I'm looking at that and you're telling me, oh, this NAI guy put up those numbers, I would not expect him to have a game that would translate to the D1 level as well as it did. And yet he goes to Evansville, and Evansville was butt cheeks the year prior. I think they won 5 games, and I think they only won 15 games last year. It wasn't an amazing season, but going from 5 to 15, and Humrichous is the leading scorer for them, and he improves his numbers. He goes from NAI level putting up 12.8 a game. Now he goes to Power 5, or not Power 5, D1 basketball, and he's putting up 14.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 1.9 assists, while shooting fucking 41% from 3 on 5 3-pointers attempted at 6'9". Dude is a super skilled player in a frame that you just don't often see. He's kind of like the Steve Novak when Steve Novak was younger, not like the Steve Novak that we probably all remember growing up when he was 32, 33 and slow. Dude has a nice handle for the 4, pulls up from anywhere, is athletic, not crazy athletic, but has enough athleticism to play at the D1 level, which was very clearly seen last year. Mm-hmm. Actually, not a great defender, but not as bad of a defender as you might expect when you look at a 6'9" white dude that only shoots threes for the most part. You would kind of expect him to not be a great defender, but he's actually not too bad. He's got good links that helps him out there. I would love him. I think he would be a great 4 in this offense. I think he'd be a great stretch 4. 5 would be kind of difficult because he's not a super physical player. And 3 would be difficult because he's not a great playmaker, and the defense would start to get choppy. But I mean, you put him in as a stretch 4 for 20, 25 minutes a game, and I think he kills it in PK systems. So that's another guy. If Osabor and Quaintance don't work out, I'm going to be upset. But falling back on a guy like Humrichous would still be pretty solid.
Yeah, no. If they land a guy like this, I mean, like you said, I don't think he's playing the 5. I mean, I he does not have the body nor the game suited for the 5. And this is a guy, in my opinion, you bring him in as a specialist. You bring him in as another body that can shoot. You have somebody get hurt, and this guy can come in and kind of be a specialist and do what he does. You know, you have the guy getting foul trouble, something like that. I see him at Louisville playing, being a fan favorite type of guy, playing 12 minutes a game.
That's really? See, I think
yeah.
he's better than that. I think he's better than that.
I mean, and maybe he is. I think he'd have to come in and prove it against, some pretty stiff competition at Louisville. When you look at his box scores, we talked about how do you play against the higher level opponents. They played BYU this year, who was a pretty quality squad. 8 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. Nothing to sneeze at. That's pretty decent. They opened the season against Miami, Ohio, 18 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. So not too shabby. Against Indiana State, 7 points, 1 assist, 0 rebounds. I think he might have been in foul trouble or something like. No foul trouble. Just played 21 minutes. Strange game for that guy. Against Drake, he had a couple of. Well, actually, the first game against Drake was pretty quality. 18 points.
I watched that first
boards.
game against Drake. He played pretty well in that one, and Drake's a really good team.
Yeah, he was 6 for 7 from the field, 4 for 4 from 3. That's pretty good. It's pretty quality. No, excuse me, 4 for 4 from 2. Sorry, 2 for 3 from 3. Still, pretty quality game against a quality Drake squad who ended up in the NCAA tournament. All told, yeah, I mean, I think that he's a good fit, and I would hope that he proves me wrong. I hope he's a 20-minute a game type of guy. But just based on what Louisville has on the roster, I don't know exactly where he would fit as far as, what outside of being a specialist shooter, maybe a average to slightly above average defender. Like he'd have to really come in, maybe put on a little bit more weight and be a really good rebounder. But I would say that, I don't see him being a post-up big man. But again, I don't know. In PK's system, maybe he doesn't need that. Maybe you can have a guy like this play at the 5. So, it's really TBD for me.
Yeah,
I've
watched a couple of his games. He's skilled. I don't think he would be a starter. He could be. I wouldn't be like terrified if October rolls around and he's our starting 4. I wouldn't expect it, but I really wouldn't hate it. He's got a versatile game. He can put it on the floor. He can play make a little bit, but he's got a nasty jump shot at 6'9". And I mean,
he does.
And the defense really, I mean, with that length, as long as he's not guarding a guy that's super, super quick or super, super physical, I think that's where he struggles, is if he's playing like a 5, he's going to get outmatched physically. Or if he's having to guard like a 2 or a 3, he's going to get beat by foot speed. But his offensive ability, I think, more than makes up for that. So I'd be excited for him. If he came, I'd see him as the backup 4, backup 3, maybe small ball 5 in a pinch, and he plays like 20, 22 minutes a game. And with Coach Kelsey's system, he's 7 dudes in every whistle.
Right. And
he's going to diversify those minutes.
Right. And that's the other thing that I was going to get to as well is, he puts these guys in, they play really hard for 5, 6, 7 minutes. They come back out. It's not like a hockey line change necessarily, but, he's subbing 2, 3 guys in at a time. If he throws a lot of looks at you, and you always end up with a lineup on the floor that's pretty well rested. Not playing guys more than 25 to 28 minutes a game, like we've talked about before. So yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Humrichous, it's not, I'm not trying to be insulting anyway. I mean, maybe he plays 20, 25 minutes a game if he comes to Louisville, but I'd be interested to see how he's used, and what it would look like. Like what's a battle between Humrichous and Abubacar Traore like?
It's the battle of two exact opposite players.
Yeah. I mean, what does he look like against the Javon Hadley in practice?
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that he'd bring something completely different, to be honest with you, because a lot of these guys have a very similar identity.
Yeah, thank you. And you saw that with Coach Kelsey with his last team at Charleston. His starting five, I can't remember his name. He's an international player. Was like super skilled, played like not Nikola Jokic level of talent, but played kind of like Jokic, where he was a playmaker at the five, would shoot a three, would facilitate the offensive a lot. But then he had James Scott as that backup center, kind of like the complete opposite, rebounder, defender, shot blocker. Like that's really all he did. So I could kind of see where he would get a guy like Abubacar Traore as the starter, who's defensive minded, who's versatile, and then he brings in a guy like Ben Humrichous off the bench, who's more offensive minded, can shoot the ball, would probably be the best shooter on the team. Like, no,
yeah.
I mean, shooting 41% on 5 attempts per game is insane. And being 6'9" makes it even crazier.
Yeah. I mean, nice height, by the way. I mean, if we're talking Louisville Live and they have a 3-point contest, I mean, you have 3 or 4 guys legitimately that you'd be really excited to see in a situation like that. Yeah, I mean, Humrichous, his game reminds me, it's a little bit different, but a specialist type of player, in the same vein that Rain Smith is a little bit, a guy he's not afraid to let it fly, like, at all. So you love to see that. I mean, you watch Rain Smith in the tournament against Alabama. He missed his first 5 shots, and the 6th shot looked like his first attempt. Like, he did not give 2 shits. He was taking that shot. So that's what you want to see, though. Guys, shooters shoot, man. So one other player to get into before we get out of here, Wesley Yates, the third, combo guard for Washington. Seems like all of the momentum is picked up for Louisville. A guy that came in as a top 50 recruit to Washington and then immediately gets hurt, and then had a red shirt this past season. So basically no tape on this guy outside of high school, but from what we saw in high school, could be a really, really quality prospect. So what do you think about Wesley Yates III? Does he end up a card, and what does he bring to the table?
Yeah, I will be honest, with all of these guys that we've talked about in the past, I've watched full games of theirs and feel pretty confident in the way that I evaluate them. Not so much with Wesley Yates. It's hard to find high school tape. And so I'm just really relying on the quick little mixtapes they put out, the 1.5-minute, the 3-minute mixtapes. From what I can see, decent athleticism, 6'4", so good height for he'd be probably a 2 guard or maybe a small ball 3. Is supposed to be a very good shooter. I don't know if you've seen his shooting form. It's not the best shooting form I've seen, and it's pretty slow. It's kind of like a lock it into the chest, and he's pushing the ball much too low for where you want that ball to be. You want that to be at your forehead and flicking up, and he's more at like the breastbone and pushing up. So, and that's just a little small thing. I just don't know. It seems like he has decent handle, high level athleticism, likes to shoot mid range, likes to shoot 3. If we bring in a guy like that, I think he's going to be your 4th guard, and I don't think we need another guard after that, especially if you got Hersey Miller as a 5th guard. So, and I wouldn't hate it because it's going to be hard. Like, you're not going to convince a top 10 transfer portal player to come to Louisville when you've already got Chucky Hepburn and you've already got Koren Johnson and you've already got Javon Hadley and Terrence Edwards. Like, the starting spots are getting taken. So to still be able to get what could be a high level player in a year or 2 years, I think that's a great addition. And it helps that we got his teammate Koren Johnson. He was just on a visit 3 days ago at this point. So we've already got him on a visit. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't visited anywhere else. So I think it's a great ad. I don't think you'll see a ton of production year 1 from him, unless he just explodes or unless we have injuries. But I think it's a great depth piece that if you're telling me a former top 50 recruit is our third guard, that's pretty nice.
We can live with that. Yeah, I mean, Wesley Yates, my only real comments on the guy, I mean, you got to bring in a little bit of youth. When you look across the way the roster has been assembled, basically you're looking at right now, you have 7 seniors plus 2 walk-ons that are super seniors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
Koren Johnson's the only guy that will have eligibility outside of this year, right?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, now these COVID years get tricky, man.
Yeah,
COVID years get tricky. Does Chucky Hepburn have a COVID year? Does Javon Hadley have a COVID year? Like,
everybody
this is stuff I don't know the answer to.
That's what I've learned.
Yeah, it seems like just when you think they're done, they're not done. I mean, look at Aiden McCool. He had the whole senior day and 100 family members there, and we all went crazy when he made a free throw to cut the lead to 8 with 7 seconds on the clock. Everybody thought his career was done, and here he comes back again. So, you really never know. But yes, in theory, who was it that we just said? Washington guard. I'm sorry.
Koren Johnson.
Koren Johnson. Thank you. I keep wanting to say Smith. Corey Smith. I don't know why. Who's Corey Smith? No idea. Anyways, Koren Johnson is a true junior, I believe. So really, the Washington guys would be the youth right now on this squad. And then James Scott, another one. James Scott is going to be a true sophomore, a guy we haven't talked about very much, a guy that's getting some serious praise and buzz as, a potential sleeper, as maybe not a starter for this Louisville squad, but a guy that plays 20, 25 minutes a night with the upside of a potential NBA draft pick, which is pretty crazy to think about. I mean, but if you look at his tape, pretty damn impressive.
Yeah,
pretty impressive.
Sense. I was going to say there's one other name I want to talk about, and we didn't talk about it before the show, so I might be catching you off guard, but Keenan Fitzmorris. Yeah. He's visiting Louisville this weekend. 7'1", ginormous human out of Stony Brook. I have not been able to watch his tape yet. I've seen some highlights. Crazy highlight plays, like actually pretty surprisingly athletic for how large and lanky he is. Spent 2 years at Stanford, got essentially no PT, like played in 5 games his sophomore year, and it was just like scrub minutes. Transferred to Stony Brook, put up 10 points a game, 3 rebounds his first year. Second year, put up 11 points, 4 rebounds, 1 block a game. So just a guy to keep on the radar. I think that if you land a guy like a Keenan Fitzmorris, probably wouldn't expect him to be a starter, but we do need depth in the front court. And so I think you're getting a 7-footer that has a little bit of range. I think he shot like 30% from 3, 33% from 3.
He could shoot
a dude that would make sense in the system. I just wanted to touch on him because he's, as far as I'm aware, the only future visitor that we haven't spoken about on the pod yet. So I just wanted to get that on people's radar as well.
That is one that completely just slipped my mind. But no, I mean, that's a great piece, because if you bring in, say Louisville finds their future starting center, whether it's James Scott, whether it's Osabor, whether it's Jaden Quaintance, whoever it is, you have to have somebody backing them up, and you'd like it to be a true big. We've seen Louisville getting into this position over and over again over the last few years. Kenny Payne's first year really was no fault of his own, as little as he accomplished as Louisville's coach. He did have Brandon Huntley-Hatfield and Sidney Curry at the same time. Nobody knew that Sidney Curry was going to have the off-the-court issues that he had at the time. And then really it turns into Brandon and Jalen Withers all of a sudden at the center. But it seems like it's just been a constant concern. Louisville hasn't had any guards, like any true point guards or any guard depth of any sort the last 2 years. But the centers has been a sneaky kind of weird position for a while. When Brandon was hurt under Kenny Payne, there was nothing. And then, there was, even dating back to Chris Mack, during the COVID season, I have been pretty adamant about the reason why they didn't make the tournament that year. They were the first team out, was because they just simply did not have anything to match up with opposing bigs for like a North Carolina, Duke, Clemson, those types of teams, Florida State, every time they played a team like that, they just got their asses handed to them for the most part, with the exception of Kentucky that season. So, I mean, dating back until basically pre-COVID, center has been a real position of difficulty for Louisville. Now, again, they've had Brandon Huntley Hatfield, they've had a few quality players, but no depth. And so that's something that we should be looking for. And I think Fitzsimmons, is that his last name? Fitzmorris. What is wrong with me? I guess it's getting kind of late, but Fitzmorris would really fit the bill as a guy that could play 8, 10, 12 minutes a game. And I mean, be a really quality player.
Yeah. You tell me we got a backup center that's 7 foot tall, that shoots 30% plus from three, and has an ability to block shots, shoot from the free throw line, has range from the mid range as well. It makes a lot of sense. And if you tell me he's our starter next year, I'm a little concerned, but you tell me that's a backup that's playing 15 minutes. I'm fine with that. Yeah. I think one other thing I'm excited about is Coach Kelsey, with the way that he spaces out minutes for players. There's typically like 8 or 9 guys that are getting about 20, 25, 28 minutes a game. He has an ability to sell more recruits on playing time and on an actual potential to get on the court. I think that's one thing that we heard with whether or not Kenny Payne was recruiting, who knows? But like, we got Sky Clark, and then it was like, well, we can't get another guard because we have Sky Clark, and they know that they're not going to get playing time. So he's going to start, and they might only get 15 minutes, 12 minutes. But like, if you've got a guy like Pat Kelsey who's going to play you off the bench 20 minutes, 22 minutes, you're still like, oh, okay, I'm still going to get 22 minutes of run at Louisville. That's worth it to me to move from Stony Brook to there, even if I'm not going to be a starter.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a Bobby Petrino running back situation, right? Like, he might have 3 or 4 really solid horses in the stable, and you let Anthony Allen get loose a few plays, and all of a sudden he gets 30 touches one night. And it's been, it's not an exact parallel, obviously, but it's been kind of like that for Pat Kelsey at both of his stops in college, where, if he has a guy that has the hot hand, he's playing really well, he's defending well, shooting well, whatever the case is, having a good game, he'll leave him in a little bit longer. So, you may see a lot of that this year, where maybe you bring in a Ben Humrichous, who he comes in off the bench at the under 16 timeout and hits 3 3-point shots, starts crashing the boards, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, Ben Humrichous played 32 minutes tonight. So stuff like that could happen as well. PK is not afraid to go to the hot hand. Ultimately, he's trying to create, great team chemistry and camaraderie and win. I mean, that's pretty much, it's as simple as that. So it's about all I got for you tonight, man. Pat Kelsey's been on the job officially 28 days today, and he has acquired 8 players in the transfer portal. It took Kenny Payne 37 days to land 1. So I'd say that we've taken quite the step forward here. And I would say within the first 37 days, Louisville's going to have more than 8 commits. That would just be a logical assessment of the situation. So
that's a recruit every 3.5 days. That's pretty damn impressive.
Well, that's almost impressive as your math, bro. Freaking
Thank you.
Whiz kid over here.
Appreciate it.
Chill
also,
out.
Before we get off, did we get 100 subscribers on Apple Podcasts? Do I have to start an OnlyFans? Because it's going to be a tough conversation with the fiance if it happened.
It wasn't subscribers. I think we were fine on the subscribers. It was the raters.
Oh, the ratings. Okay.
Yeah. The subscribers are fine. Don't unsubscribe and resubscribe or any of that bullshit. Just give us 5 stars. That'd be fantastic. It's about all we got.
Everybody that rates us will get a foot pick from me. That's my new promise.
There you go. I've never really gotten too close to your feet, Jake. So,
you don't know what you're
I'm
missing
not
out
sure. All right. On that note, it's time to get out of here. Jake Hook, he's at UofL_updates on the tweeters. I am at Press Meyer or you can find us as always at the State of Louisville and at Starting 502 on Twitter or, all platforms. You want to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, whatever suits you. We're just not on, what's the Trump one? What's the
what is it called? I don't remember.
Truth
Telegram?
is like Truth Social or something.
Yeah, Truth Social. That's it.
We're not on Truth Social yet. So
speak for yourself, brother. I'm on there all the time.
He's like, I got 4 burners on Truth Social. Until next time, guys, make sure you support our sponsors, especially Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon, again, at store.mrandmrsbourbon.com. Until next time, Starting 502 podcast. Let's get out of here and go Cards.
Go Cards.